Wired for Winning, celebrating the extraordinary minds of those with ADHD. The jingle as well. So, hey, everybody, welcome to Wired for Winning podcast, episode 4, with Helen Pengelly from Bognor Regis, I believe. And very welcome, Helen, to join us today. I'll just run the quick jingle. Apologies for the volume on this. Wonderful to get that piece out of the way anyway, so thank you for that. Helen, you're very welcome to the podcast. Oh, could you not? Brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, well, there's technical issues from the start anyway, as long as we're recording, and that's the main thing. So listen, you're very welcome to the podcast. You're I'm going to say a veteran podcaster yourself, actually. I've listened to some of your episodes, which is wonderful. Everybody, Helen Pengelly, like myself, diagnosed later on in life with ADHD. We're going to continue now on the story, but Helen, you're very welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story with ADHD and you know, your journey so far and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting because I've been meditating for many, many years. And so it was interesting when I got the diagnosis, because my kind of natural inquiring mind wants to find out more about this and go a bit deeper, and not just take everything that you see and you read about it on face value, because there's so much information and misinformation out there as well. So I was diagnosed when I was 58, and so it does make me laugh when you see people say, "Oh, I was diagnosed with late in life and at the age of 27 or something." So you've got no idea.
Well, actually, I'm humbled to be in your presence right now because I was diagnosed at 43. So you beat me by over a decade, actually. So, wow, that must have been a massive revelation for you on reflection of looking back on your life. Did you kind of think about that at the time and go, those things that happened were because? Wow.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
Suddenly, yeah, well, it was like, well, that was what kind of led me to the realization, really, because I was at a very low point in my life and financially as well, and I was like thinking, well, what's going on here? Why is it that other people, I mean, and I don't like to compare myself to other people because you can't believe what you read on social media, but at the same time I did know people who were able to start a business and then sort of almost straight away start earning money from it, and I'm thinking, and I've done all these programs and why spent lots of money on it and coaching and stuff, and why hasn't this worked? And then I saw a post with a link to it was Gabor Mate's book Scattered Minds, and I read that weekend, and then suddenly it all made sense, because the way he talked about, you know, how your brain was wired and things like that. And so it's like, oh, okay, now all this makes sense, why there were areas of my life where I'd had challenges. But then it was like you saw some of, you know, then I used to saw information about ADHD everywhere after that, as you do when you start, when you become aware of something, you start seeing all this information. And it was kind of confusing because some of it, resonated, but some of it were things what people were saying. It's like, well, that's not like me at all. And I think, you know, that people, and I know it's a lot of it, especially on like TikTok and Instagram, it's like for to get followers and likes, and it's just like all these memes, and I'm thinking it's not that simple. it's like oh, well, I've got ADHD, so I can't do maths. I say, no, that's not right, because I've got a maths degree. I used to be a maths teacher, so that it's got nothing to do with that. It's a lot of it is to do with how you're brought up, your conditioning, and your beliefs. So, my dad was a maths teacher. My mum hated maths, so I could have gone either way. But my dad encouraged me. So, I never had that belief that I couldn't do it. And I've coached and tutored many people who think they can't do it and realize that actually you can. It's like, because sometimes you need somebody who believes in you before you can believe in yourself. And I think that was a lot of the things, growing up. I never really wanted to be a teacher, but it was like, well, I needed to do something that so I could earn money and have the school holidays off with my kids. So that's why I ended up becoming a teacher. But I was also very, very creative and love cooking. And that was another thing. I was saying, oh, I hate cooking. That's because I've got ADHD. I can't bother to cook. And I'm thinking, well, I love cooking. That's like my creative outlet, I'm not very good at drawing or painting, but well, I suppose I could do abstract art, but cooking is my thing, and I do a lot of it. So it was like, well, what's going on here? And it was so I got the diagnosis, and because of my age, the psychiatrist didn't recommend taking meds because he was worried about the side effects, because they can potentially raise your blood pressure. And he said, well, you've managed all these years without them. But part of me was curious, thinking, oh, wonder what they'd be like, what it would be like. And I'm thinking, no, that's the wrong reason for taking them. It's like, so, and I read, people's experiences, what had happened, both the good and the bad. And from the positive benefits that people got from taking meds, I realised, well, I get that from meditating. So it's like I say, well, meditation, not medication. And again, that's another huge misconception. And I've even seen people who call themselves ADHD experts saying it's harder for people to meditate if they've got ADHD. I'm thinking, well, that's not true, because I've been doing it for 18 years. And it's not about, and I'm sure back in the day, the Buddha didn't, if ADHD had been a thing 2,500 years ago, I'm sure the Buddha wouldn't have gone around telling people, well, you can't meditate because you've got ADHD.
Exactly.
And so for me, well, it's just about, it was about understanding my mind and how it worked. So, and that's what meditation is, There's, oh, well, I can't meditate because I can't stop thinking. Well, you're never going to stop thinking. Of course you're not. That's not the point of it. The point is to become aware of your thought patterns and see what's going on in your mind, and actually say, well, if you've got a really busy mind, well, then it makes it easier because it's more interesting.
Absolutely.
To see what's happening. It's like, well, where did that thought come from?
Yeah, that's very interesting, actually. What was the thing then, that led to you going to get diagnosed? Was there something that said, was it something you read or something you kind of an experience you had and just said, I think this may be me. I'll go to make an appointment with a medical professional. What was that thing that for people out there who are kind of pre-diagnosis, who think they might have ADHD, what was that thing for you? Do you remember?
Well, it was when I read that book, the Gabor Mate book, and then this all made sense. And I'd had, various challenges with my mental health over the years anyway. And I knew that I was very lucky because, it was nearly 4 years ago now, and I'd had at that point, I thought I might have bipolar disorder. And and I realised that there's a lot of similarities as well. And I called my doctor, not really knowing and expecting, I would get an appointment in a couple of weeks. And they said, oh, no, you come in this afternoon. And so I was like, and that's the thing. It can be such a lottery. And I'm really lucky that my health centre, my GP surgery, they take mental health really seriously. And so, and they have mental health workers and a mental health, what they call social prescriber. And so I just got so much support, because after that, it was a really difficult 6 months. The most difficult thing actually was dealing with the DWP Because when you're self-employed,
Okay.
and you've got to try, you can't, obviously you don't get sick pay, you know. Because a friend of mine said, well, you can be signed, even if you're self-employed, you can get signed off and get sick pay, but you have to jump through all these hoops. And because if you look okay physically, they don't believe you, you know. It's like, well, you can work
Absolutely.
because, yeah. And I was saying to them, look, I know myself, I just need this time to because
To
you know, I could.
consolidate. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, again, like you said before, you look back over your life and you can see, like, I can see all the times where I burned out, and you recognize when that's starting to happen. And I said, look, if I don't take time out now, and it's gonna take longer, it's gonna be worse. And you know, we're lucky here. I suppose it have been most places. We've got, like, in West Sussex, there's a mental health helpline at 24 hours, so I was calling them, and of course they say, well, I can tell just by listening to you that you need that you and that's the thing. It's like, we know ourselves the best and what we need. But anyway, I always just joke and say, well, if you didn't have mental health problems before dealing with the DWP, you certainly do.
Absolutely. Just for our international listeners, the DWP, because I'm based in Ireland, actually, Helen, and
Okay.
we have a load of listeners in the US as well. The DWP is the Department of Work and Pensions in the United Kingdom, and actually the arc of the story of the podcast is actually to have a look at social acceptance of conditions like ADHD in the world. Certainly here in Ireland, I live in Dublin, and you know, the social acceptance of ADHD is way behind that of the United Kingdom. And certainly the United Kingdom seems to be, and again, this is my opinion, it seems to be way behind that of the United States as well. Now, that may be a good thing or a bad thing, but just you talk about, you know, before we start talking and go into detail on, you know, the techniques that you use with meditation to support your ADHD, if you don't mind, I'd be very interested in looking at and you describing specifically some of the behaviors you have, which, you know, are neurodiverse. Again, your story, I'll start actually with my own. I have what I call clever days of you know, a high IQ, and I have what I call stupid days of a very low IQ. And on those stupid days, they're the days I medicate. But what I couldn't tell you is tomorrow going to be a clever day or a stupid day? I don't know. It's a lottery of what tomorrow is. How do you know, how does those behaviors come out in yourself as a matter of interest?
Well, I think it's similar, but for me, it's more to do with energy, how much energy I have. And I'm very much like, I'm noticing, like today, it's a lovely sunny day here on the south coast of England, and I woke up sort of full of energy. But the last few days, it's been really dark in the mornings, and I just feel like I just want to hibernate and I don't want to get up. And I think that was the thing that I couldn't, that sometimes it's difficult to get across to people. It's like, you might be seeing me on a good day, but on some days, if I can't get out of bed until 11, 12 o'clock, you know, I'm not going to get much done that day. And I think, as you say, it wasn't that it was that level of consistency, and then realizing, no, actually, I'm not lazy. And I think it's also, you know, through meditating as well, I learn to listen to my body and what my body needs. And it's like, if my body needs rest, I'm going to rest. And it's very difficult. And I think a lot of what, you know, we call sort of ADHD is a problem that's caused by the society that we live in, because we live in a very unnatural world. And I, you know, having been a teacher, I didn't return after the pandemic because I was furloughed, and then I decided not to go back. But it was like, even when I was teaching, I used to, you know, I was always fascinated by people's behaviours, both the kids and the other teachers. And it's like, and you're thinking, well, we put in all these, like 2,000 people, average secondary school size, I think these days, or over 1,000 anyway, in this concrete box all day for 8 hours. And you're surprised that they exhibit these weird behavior traits, because it's not normal for kids to sit still all day. They're meant to be moving, they're meant to be active. And that is true. And it's like, now people are saying, oh, everybody's a bit ADHD, and people get upset by that. But I don't, because I think we all need to be able to take care of ourselves. We all need to move. It's not normal for us to sit down at an office desk for 8 hours a day. We need to exercise. Our bodies are designed to move. And of course, the studies show that now, that's what keeps you healthier in old age. And so, my dad, he's 91 now, but he's really fit and active, because he always used to walk to work, and he's always been active. He's still got his allotment and things like that. So it's really important that we move our bodies. So this idea of hyperactivity, it's like, I'm thinking, is it really a problem, or is it that we're making it a problem because we're expecting people to fit into this unnatural kind of system that we've created? And there's a really interesting book I read recently he's a psychiatrist in the UK called Dr. Sami Tamimi, and it's called Naughty Boys. I don't, have you heard of him? Yeah,
I have.
And it's really interesting, because he relates it to different cultures and the different cultural expectations throughout the world about how boys should behave. And so, and of course, it was much more commonly diagnosed in boys, because that was always my thought. Oh, this is, that's what I knew about ADHD. It was hyperactive boys who couldn't sit still. And I've got 3 sons, and my youngest, he's especially like that. But when he was at school, it's like, well, he didn't want to do all the academic stuff. He wanted to make things, and he was interested in how things worked, and now he's a carpenter. So it's like, well, those skills are not valued as highly as like academic skills, and I think all that needs to change. So it's very interesting when you look at it, because it's like, well, how much, and calling things a disorder. And it was like I was saying before about the last couple of days, I've been feeling like, because it's been so dark and I just want to hibernate, and then they call that, and I have got a sad lamp here, seasonal affective disorder. And I switched it on yesterday, and I'm thinking, well, this isn't really natural to have this bright light this time of year. Animals, they go away when it's cold, and they snuggle up and they sleep and they rest and they keep warm. And it's like, why as humans don't we do that? We have to keep going. We think we need to be busy all the time. And I think it's the fact that we need to just listen to our body more, and trust our intuition and our instincts that what we know is right. But it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, especially in the society that we live in. It's like, and I think, I was talking to my parents last night, and they don't understand how I live my life, because I don't do a 9-to-5 job. I haven't had a 9-to-5 job since 2005, So it's like, well, but I just can't do that. I just feel like, it's like your wings are being clipped, and I feel like, a zoo animal or something.
Do you, just as a matter of interest on that, actually, on that subject matter, what I'm finding, talking to lots of different people about, the structure of their, individual days, I need structure, but then I don't want it, and I'll deliberately sabotage it from time to time to go, no, I'm going to break it all apart, and then I come back to structure. But just having that ability to switch between, a structured life and a non-structured life is a very good thing. For me anyway, I have a very understanding wife, and I go and do this thing from time to time where I'll jump on a train to Cork or to Belfast, or I'll jump on a ferry, and that movement with a laptop allows me to think. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a dopamine high or a dopamine effect, or just the fact that there's movement around me allows me to think and concentrate. I can do it at my desk as well. But those that need to get away and do something, I think you're absolutely right with what you say. Listening to your body, the circadian rhythms, the book that you mentioned, Naughty Boys, that was me when I was at school in
me,
England.
except I'm not a boy, but that was me. Yeah.
Tell me. But
Yeah.
one of the things is, what's very interesting also is I've noticed in women that I've spoken to who have been diagnosed with ADHD as well, is typically, and again, everybody's unique and everybody's different. But what I've noticed is in these conversations, women tend to internalize the symptoms of ADHD as opposed to externalize them. Is that your experience or not, as a matter of interest?
I don't really know, because I suppose there was I suppose it's like that. There was, growing up in the 1970s, it was like there was that expectation that girls behave this way, boys behave that way. Primary school was fine because I was born in 1963, so I'm a baby boomer, and we had over 40 children in our class in primary school, and it was a mixed school, and there was always stuff going on. I was like one of the brightest in the class, so I always thought everybody was doing the same work that I did, but looking back I realised they weren't, because especially like in maths, I was thinking there's no way that other people would have been doing what I was doing. But obviously the teachers realised what I needed, and they gave me that stimulation, like intellect. So there was the intellectual stimulation, which I always craved, which I read a lot. Yeah, because that was one of the other things when I went for my first, because for my diagnosis, I went to a local mental health centre, and the first psychiatrist asked me about my childhood, and then I said, I love reading, because we didn't have a TV when I was growing up, and she said, well, you can't have ADHD then because you like reading. And I said, well, it's not that. It's like I read about what I'm interested in. I couldn't read a book like my son bought me this book that he loves, but it didn't interest me at all, so I couldn't read that. If it's something that interests me, then of course I can read it. But then when I went to secondary school, because I was like one of the top of the class, I went to a grammar school, which for people who aren't in the UK, we used to have like a selected school system, so we had to do an exam called the 11 plus, and if you passed that, then you could go to a grammar school, like for people with higher sort of intellectual abilities, and this was all girls. Yes. It was a church school, it was very strict, and then I was always well behaved in primary school, but as soon as I got to secondary school, and I was bullied as well because I was really small, and so of course I had to stand up for myself. And because I was really little, I couldn't, these big girls, there's no way if they tried to beat me up that I would win a fight with them. So I discovered that if I made them laugh, they would leave me alone then, because they thought, if I was funny. And so that became like my defense mechanism, was making people laugh. And I was quite good at it. And I have done some stand-up comedy. But then it's interesting now when I look back and I think, well, nobody ever said to me, oh, you're really funny, Helen, you could go and become a comedian. It's like this, I don't know, it's our education system's weird. It's like it doesn't look at what that everybody has to try and kind of fit this thing. Oh, you've got to go and do it was O levels back then, now GCSEs, and then your A levels, and then go to university. But it's like this, and also especially for girls at that time, nobody really talked to us about career options, because it was like, oh, you could be a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary, and then you get married and your husband to look after you, kind of thing. And that was very much the way that I was conditioned, and it was like I just didn't really know. And then I ended up doing bookkeeping, getting a job in doing bookkeeping and accounts, which I enjoyed because of all the numbers. But then when I never stayed in a job more than 18 months, because once I'd learnt it all, then it was like it wasn't challenging anymore. So then I want to go and do something else. But I think, that probably applies to a lot of people. But so there was always wanting that kind of that stimulation, which I don't think is a bad thing. It's like always, we're always learning, as long as long as we live. But yeah, I can't remember what your question was now.
No, that's okay. No, it's great. This is lovely. Please, it's wonderful, because when I'm doing these podcasts and I ask questions and we go off on tangential things, the question was around looking at how, when I've talked to many people, male and females seem to describe internalize, whereas boys will externalize and show naughty behaviors, right? And so on and so forth. Is that something you've experienced? Or I don't think you have, because, and again, I'm not a clinician, but using comedy as a defense mechanism is incredibly clever. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredibly clever. So you sound more extrovert than introvert, and I know we can all be both, but so internalizing, it doesn't sound to me like that is you. Again, I'm not speaking for you.
When I got the diagnosis, they said the combined type isn't there, because there's, I can't remember what they call it now, but there's like the hyperactive, and the other one isn't hyperactive, and then all combined. So yeah, I mean, but I suppose as I got older, because I mean, because when you're an adult, there is these certain ways that you're expected to behave, even though you still feel like a 12-year-old inside. It's like, it's not appropriate for me to make wisecracks all the time, so in certain situations. But it's also interesting what you said about structure as well, because for me, and I think, because I was a full-time teacher for 3 years, and at the end of those 3 years, I could not face another year of going in the same classroom, because the classroom that I was in didn't even have a view; it just looked out on a brick wall, and doing the same national numeracy strategy. Even all the lessons were planned out, so there was very little wiggle room for creativity, and I just couldn't face doing that for another year. But yet there were other teachers there that loved that. They were really organised and that kind of thing. And it was the head of department, he was always praising me on my subject knowledge. I got like the best subject knowledge, which upset some of the others, but I'm thinking, why are you upset? Because you've got other strengths. I wish I could be as organised I wish I could control the classroom as well as you do, that kind of thing. But yeah, so it's some kind of structure. But then I go on a lot of retreats. I volunteer at a retreat centre where I go and cook. And so, of course, there's a certain structure there, but within that structure, I have room for my creativity.
Creativity, of course.
Yeah. So it's like and it's great because that's one of the reasons I couldn't carry on with teaching, because I was just crap at planning lessons. It's right, because when I was doing my teacher training, one of my mentors said, I was very good at thinking on my feet and responding to the needs of the kids. And when I was in my first job and the head teacher observed one of my lessons, it was a criticism that I didn't stick to the lesson. I'm thinking, well, you don't know what's going to happen, do you? You can plan this, but you don't know how the kids are going to respond or whatever. So it's like, I was going back to what I was saying before. It's about learning to live more intuitively. I mean, and I love that quotation from Joseph Campbell. It's something like, sometimes we have to let go of the life we planned, or something like, and live the life that's waiting for us. Because I was 60 this year, and I suppose, well, I don't know where I thought I'd be at this age, but certainly not doing what I'm doing now. So it's just like, but it's okay, I'm okay with that, and it's just like, it is what it is, and that's also kind of got me through those dark times as well. It's like that actually most of our problems, or all of our problems, are created by our minds, and when we recognise that, okay, not saying it's easy, and sometimes we get it can feel overwhelming, but it's just like having to come back to that present moment and thinking, okay, I don't know what's going to happen next month, where the money's going to come from to pay my rent, but today my rent is paid, I've got a roof over my head, I've got food, I've got a bed to sleep in, so I'm better off than a lot of people in the world. And I think that and practicing gratitude as well kind of got me through that. And I see that in a lot of people's, on social media. It's like they, especially, with this neurodiversity thing now, it's like, oh, we've got to go and train everybody else. And it's like, no, it's not about what other people are doing. You've got to change. Change comes from within. It's like you can't control what other people do, what they say, but you can control yourself and how you respond to other people, and responding with kindness. So and I realized actually when I was doing my coach training about 10 years ago, it was like a year-long training, and about halfway through it I realized that part of my motivation for doing it was that I realized that I had to go and fix all the problems in the world. And then I thought, and that was like, oh, that's interesting. Of course, but because I thought, oh, well, I can become a coach and help everybody else fix their problems. And I'm thinking, well, no, it doesn't work like that. I've got to sort myself out,
Sort yourself out.
The rest will follow. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, actually, as well, that the reflection of that. I remember doing some courses many years ago, previous to diagnosis, and similar to yourself, going. And it was a course in neurolinguistic programming with a guy called Richard Bandler at the time in London. And I remember coming out of there going, I can heal everybody. I can fix the world, same as yourself. And actually, years later, that you can't fix everybody, but actually it's about a reflection of yourself, as well. So tell me, as a teacher previously and now a coach, do you feel, if you compare, say, the United States to the United Kingdom, if you compare the social norms of how neurodiversity, and I don't want to say just ADHD, is kind of thought about, do you think the UK has come a long way in accepting it in the school system now? I mean, we talk about diagnosis, and I often hear and read about, schools that have changed the structure of their classrooms to have movement breaks, and, there's special education needs teachers that are added in. And of course, there's money constraints and there's resource constraints. I get that. But do you think there is a move towards adopting a less, as you put it, in a box type of, structure to allow people who are neurodiverse to function better? Are we nowhere near that yet?
Well, I've been out of the education system for nearly 4 years now, but I don't think we're anywhere near that, because you only have to look at the amount of the way that school refusals are increasing. And because I think what people found when, they were furloughed and they were at home, that they had that flexibility. They could do a bit of work, then you can go off and play a game, do some painting, go for a walk or whatever, and then come back. And of course that helps with the brain functioning as well. I remember trying to get some kids to do some yoga once, because I came into the class, they were like year 8 or 9, so like 13, 14-year-olds, and they're all over the place, and you're thinking they're not ready to learn. And I think that's what the education system doesn't understand. You can't teach kids until they're ready to learn. And then I said, come on, let's do some stretches, and they were like, oh, what's this like? Fuck off. Kind of thing. but then once I thought, okay, let's approach this a different way. And I was in another class, and then I was walking around, and then I just put my hands in a prayer position up behind my back like that. I just started walking around the classroom, which is like a yoga posture. And the kids were saying, well, what are you doing, miss? And I said, well, can you do that? And then they all started doing it. And then they said, well, and then can you do this? And can you do that? And then so I call it surreptitious yoga.
That's a great idea.
Doing that, then it just helps them to calm their minds down. Because if they've just come in from playtime where you don't know what's been going on, they might have been running around playing football, they might have had an argument with their best friend. And of course, for kids, it's important stuff. And it's like the teachers just, I say not all of them, but many of them just dismiss that. Right, okay, you've got to sit down and do maths now or history. And then it's like going from one lesson to another. And like in secondary schools, like you've got 5 usually 5 lessons a day, and then so you've got to do 5 different subjects, and some of which you probably aren't interested in at all. And you read stuff on social media, but a lot of it is just like it's all talk and no action. They say, oh yeah, we love Ken Robinson. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, well, if you love his talk so much, why don't you put into place what he's saying then? But they don't. And it's like you go into schools and they have all these slogans like inspire, dream, believe, and things like that, and then they're going around telling kids to do their top button up and pull their socks up and make sure their uniform's correct. And it's like, because because there was one school I was due to do some cover work at because they hadn't managed to employ a maths teacher. So I was going in to do a bit of work until they managed to get one. And then I went in to talk to them, and then the day before I was due to start, I got a call from the agency, and they said, oh, there's going to be a problem with this. There might be a problem. Me thinking it's like some admin thing. And they said, oh, it's your hair. And I said, my hair? And I said, they said you've got pink hair. And I said, yeah, I've got some pink highlights in my hair. Oh, well, that doesn't fit with their dress code. I'm like, what? It's like, you're not bothered whether I can actually teach. And I was like, I'm thinking, actually, I don't want to work there, because I was working as a supply teacher, substitute teacher. And that the kids used to love it because it created like a connection, because you don't know these kids. So it's like, then you walk in and they see, here's a teacher who's a bit different, like she's got pink bits in her hair, and then they would comment on it, and then that creates a bit of rapport with them.
Of course.
Yeah. And then they say, oh, well, we wish we could, we're not allowed to dye our hair this colour. And I said, well, if I was your head teacher, you could dye your hair any colour you like. It's like, what does the colour of your hair matter? And these things, silly things that we're teaching kids. And I think that's, with more kids refusing to go to school, it's like, I saw a lovely post on LinkedIn the other day saying, why aren't we listening to them? They're showing us, they're communicating through their behaviour, but we're assuming, and that's the thing, I think, in answer to your question, that it's always like that the problem, or always, mostly, because there are exceptions always, but it's seen that the problem is with the kids and not with the system, with the education system, with the school itself. And I can sort of, my own experience and I qualified in 2002, then taught full time for 3 years from 2002 to 2005, and I had a girl in one of my classes who had Asperger's, and I didn't really know anything about it. And I just happened to find out by chance in a meeting, in a staff meeting, and they were talking about this girl and saying, oh, she was refusing to go to all lessons or causing problems, misbehaving in all her lessons except maths. And then, it was only years later, and I thought about this. I'm thinking, she was never a problem in my lessons, because I guess I just, and I think I let go of maybe because I was older. I suppose it's different if you go into teaching when you're 21 or something, but I was like 39, so I got life experience and I was a mother. And it was like, well, this is what these kids need. Let's give it to them. And, and she liked that structure. So come in, she used to give out the book. She liked sitting at the front where she could see me, and a lot of, sort of affirmation and praise, and she was fine. And I was just thinking, well, nobody ever asked what I was doing. So, well, why is she not a problem in maths? And she is in all these other lessons, which is the crazy. And I see that a lot. It's like it's like, and I suppose that kind of makes sense that there was this connection with the neurodivergent kids. There was like, we understood each other because I struggled at school, and so these kids that were struggling at school, I identified with that, and I could empathize with them, and also it's like bringing fun into lessons. And like you say, now they're having movement breaks and things like that. Well, it's like, why can't we teach them that it can be fun as well, and that everything has to have a purpose? It's like, well, why are we doing this, miss? well, how will it help me in later life? I said, well, maybe it won't. But I said, why can't you just have the satisfaction of figuring out this equation and getting the answer right, and just and how that feels, and that you've achieved something. And it's like, yeah, and I think because that's a problem, isn't it, with our society? Everything has to have a point to it. It's like we can't just enjoy things for their own sake.
For the sake of joy, you know.
Yeah.
I agree. Tell me, you know, just that story with the girl with Asperger's. Do you feel having ADHD? And again, I'm drawing maybe some commonality, but I've always felt in my life, I've had a certain empathy with people, or I can kind of see people. And a friend of mine, Peter Shankman, who has a podcast called Faster Than Normal, written a book there, lives in New York. And he says when he meets somebody for the first time, while he is shaking their hand, in that 2 or 3 seconds, he will have made friends with them, had an argument with them, broken up with them, made best friends again with them, and the handshake is over, and his brain is working that quick. And I'm the same as that. I kind of have these pseudo relationships with people and kind of figure it all out very quickly, and have that rapport, that empathy to understand, you know, how to help people. And I've felt I've had that all my life. Is that something I mean, you've obviously described that with the Asperger's girl story, but I mean, in general in life, do you find that as well, or not?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because when I was at school as well, even though, yeah, I struggled, there were other kids that, you know, you could see the ones who were maybe on the well, when I was in primary school, certainly. In secondary school, not so much, because there was like, oh well, if because one of my best friends in primary school, she was a bit, I mean, I'm not saying this unkindly, but she was a bit weird like me. But then and she had a difficult time at secondary school, and that is something I do feel bad about, that I sort of, well, she wasn't in my class, we went into different classes, but but it was a self-preservation thing. It's like, if people think I'm friendly with her, I'm going to get beaten up as well. So, you know,
Okay.
it's like, because she's not one of the cool kids. And so, you know, teenage girls are horrible. I'm glad I had 3 sons. But it's, yeah. And I think at the time it was like, yeah, it was self-preservation. So I've learned, you know, to be kind to myself as well, that I was only doing what I thought was best. And you know, when you're like 11, 12 years old, you know, you're not an adult. You don't rationalize things the same way that we do now when you're older, and you're going through puberty, and you've got all your hormones kicking off and everything. So it's, yeah, but I think so, definitely. And I think it, since, you know, I joined the Buddhist group to start, you know, learning to meditate, I found that within, here's a community where I can just be accepted for who I am, and nobody's expecting you to be anything you're not. And so it's like, when I go and cook on the retreats, they plan the menus and they buy all the food, although they plan the menus, but then I don't stick to it. I can do my own thing, and
Like it.
and I don't have to do the planning or the shopping or ordering the food. I can go in and do the bit that I'm good at. And I think that's a problem, again, with our society, that we live in these like these nuclear units now, and we're all disconnected. So, you know, now my kids are grown up, I live on my own, and I'm thinking this, and I, you know, and I realised this when I was going to to try and sort of get the support when I was signed off. And it was like, but also, not only that, I said, I'm nearly 60, I'm not young anymore, and I live on my own. So it's like, everything I'm expected to work to earn enough to pay all my bills. You know, I don't, you know, and I realise, you know, as you get older, that having a partner is a luxury. It really is, having a supportive partner, because I've never had that. So it's always fallen on me. So it's like, well, looking after my house, well, a flat, I live in a flat now, but doing that, keeping it clean, tidy, going shopping to buy the food, cooking my meals, that's almost a full-time job in itself. And then you're expecting me to work on top of that. And so it's like, it's no wonder sometimes that I burn out.
I concur with that so much. Like you, I love cooking, and I love from time to time having people over for dinner, and I can plan meticulously a menu. But if you said to and cook, and everybody will enjoy it and have a great night. But if you said to me, George, could you do the weekly shopping for the next 6 weeks, and it's going to be a consistent menu on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can't do that. I find that an impossible task. And I don't know why, because actually, when I think about it rationally, it's not that difficult. It's just, it's not lighting my brain up. That's all it is. It's just not giving me that excitement, you know. And tell me, just on that, again, if you don't mind me asking, you've mentioned your age a couple of times there, but and the late diagnosis, you know, for others out there, you know, who are pre-diagnosis, right? That seems this thing called diagnosis seems to be a kind of a point in time where you go, and going back to the beginning of the podcast, it seems to be this point in time where, oh my God, there's this revelation. I am now neurodiverse officially in the eyes of the world. The reality is that, you know, I friends and colleagues who I personally am convinced that have ADHD, who will never go for diagnosis, you know, and that's fine too. There is no right or wrong answer. You know, I like, you know, unlike some, I medicate probably 4 times a month. Some people I know medicate every day. Some people don't medicate at all, like yourself. There is no right answer, Helen, to this, but there is a way, hopefully, that by getting this message out there, you know, that you've already done, that we're doing now, and hopefully will continue to do in the future, that, you know, these individuals who are going through these tough times, and the reason, just so you know, the reason I started this podcast is because if you go to ADHD Europe and you look at these statistics and you say, hey, listen, you know, people with ADHD are 5 times more likely to end up in prison. They're 5 times more likely to commit suicide. They're 5 times more likely to, you know, end up in debt, and so on and so forth. And I on the other side of that, there are people out there, and like you, I've had very dark times. You know, I'd like to think that I'm on the other side of that and of a measurement of relative success. And I don't mean wealth. I just mean mental success, you know, that in myself, I feel I have moved forward. You know, and getting that message out there to those that may not be so fortunate in their own mind, that there is opportunity to have a sense of relative success. And, you know, your story today is very poignant because, you know, meditation, the Buddhist group, the cooking, being allowed to do what you want to do. And that phrase is very important to me, being allowed to do what you want to do without fear of retribution or reprisal is so important. But do you have a message to somebody, those people out there who are pre-diagnosis, okay, and they're kind of going, should I get diagnosed? Should I not? Does it matter to me or not? I mean, what's your thought process on that one, you know?
Well, for me, it's just another. For me, it's just like another step in the journey to understanding myself. And I've been on this journey for a long time, and it was like then, you know, and I think we're all different, and there's no right or wrong. And it's like some people, right? Oh, they get the diagnosis. I want to take the drugs. That's fine. And I, because I've had people accusing me that I'm anti-medication. I said, I'm not at all. It's a personal choice, you know.
Agreed.
And so it's what works for you. You find everybody's doing their best with what they know, the tools that they've been given, their life experiences, their education, and so it's like it's that personal decision. And then, but for me, it's like, okay, then I'm going to read all this stuff on it. And then so this year I was reading a lot about trauma, and then I went and did a qualification to become a trauma-informed coach, and realising, so that example I gave about the girl with Asperger's, I'd been working in a trauma-informed way for years, even before it was called that. So, but, and then seeing like, well, the similarities between the ADHD symptoms and trauma, and I'm thinking, can we really separate the two? I don't believe we can, because there's not a physical thing of ADHD. It's just something that they put in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in the United States with mental health conditions, and and there's all these things coming in now. And there's another book I read, I can't remember what it's called now, by a Welsh chap called Windor, I think, or Dore. Its first name is Wynn, Wynn, and Dore, and it started because his daughter was very seriously dyslexic, and I think when she was about 25, she tried to take her own life, because she was just like, she just felt like she was a complete failure. And he said there's got to be a way around this. So then he was talking to people about, the brain and how the brain works, and I've been interested in that for years, about the brain, and of course through meditation, and we know that meditation rewires the brain. So I'm thinking, why does ADHD have to be a final thing? Why can't, and if you say, well, you can heal it, people get upset. I'm thinking, well, I believe that you can, because we know it's possible to rewire the brain. And when you look at, like, things that are typical, like ADHD, things like difficulties with executive function, emotional regulation, and things like that, this is all linked to trauma as well. So, and we all have it to some level. It's like, just like, as I've touched on already, living in the modern world is traumatic in itself, because we're living in such an unnatural way. So it's like, well, when you realise that, and you can start to deal with those impulses and things like that. And there was somebody made a comment on a post the other day about that, and I said, well, you can overcome these impulses, this impulsive behaviour. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I think, it's like, but I know that some people would just prefer to medicate it and not, and that's fine. But for me, I'm like on my sort of journey, because I want to heal, and it's like my motto for my website is heal yourself and heal the world, because I know that by becoming a better person myself and healing, and so if I can stop acting so impulsively, which is, been harmful and detrimental to me and to those around me, then why wouldn't I want to do that? So it's and I can see, like with my sons as well, the effect that it's had on them. I was thinking, like, I've got 3 sons, and the youngest 2 are really quite successful now, and I'm thinking, well, that's in partly due to me, because I just encourage them to do whatever they want, follow their dreams. But nobody did that for me. And even my oldest son, he's got all sorts of problems with drugs and alcohol and mental health things. But it's like, well, and then again, I had to let go of that. And, well, that's his life. It's his journey. He's going through this, whatever he's going through. He's got to learn the lessons he needs to learn from this. But I can be here to support him. I don't have to condone what he's doing. But I'm always going to love him, and he knows he can call me any time, and I will. And I'm here for him, but I'm not going to give him money, because or things like that, or anything that's going to enable him. That I'm here to love, and I'll, it's like, if he wants, for example, like once he said, oh, can I have the money to buy a train ticket? And I said, well, I'll come round to the station with you and buy the train ticket for you. And they said, oh no, it's all right, I don't need it, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just, for me, for me, it was that next step on the journey of understanding myself and this healing. It's like, it's I don't know whether you've heard this sort of like metaphor before. It's like an onion, and you peel off one layer, you heal one layer, and then there's another layer underneath. So this is just like another layer. And it's like, you're saying before, we've been through these dark times, and thinking, well, there's no guarantee that there's not going to be more in the future. And it was almost like when I had that sort of like aha moment about ADHD, I just done this lovely retreat, and I was feeling all like, woo. And then my parents said something that completely triggered me. I was thinking, oh dear, more work to do here.
Here we go.
Something
Another
else
one.
to look at again. And so that's what it was like. But it is, the world is changing, and there are more people that are more spiritual now. And I just see that it's just part of that. It's just part of that journey. And I think, and going back to sort of that, because, my maths background, I like sciencey stuff as well. So, as well as and that's what I like about everything I do. It's like it's backed up in science. It's not just woo-woo. It's like although I would accept it without the science, but I love that there is the science behind it as well. That 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha was going around teaching all this stuff, nobody could do brain scans and things like that. They could probably see in him that that something's changed, but they just had to take it on faith. And I think that's what gets me through those dark times as well, is this sense of faith that there's something that's keeping me going, and this isn't just happening to me, it's happening for me, and there's lessons in this that I can learn. And it's like, and realizing, like one of the ADHD traits is having lots of ideas and starting things, and then how many ideas for businesses. So about 2.5 years ago, or year and a half ago, I can't remember now, I've lost track. When was it? It must have been the beginning of last year, beginning of 2022. I had all these ideas, and I think, well, what's been consistent in my life? It's like meditation. So that's what I'm going to focus on, and talking about the benefits of meditation, and also EFT, emotional freedom technique, because when I was going through a difficult time just nearly 4 years ago, I'd heard of it before, but I came across it in more depth through the World Tapping Summit, and it really helped me. And so then I signed up and then to train to become a practitioner myself. And again, there's all the science behind that. And there is an episode on my podcast where I interview Dr. Peter Stapleton. That's PETA. She's a woman, PETA, Peter, who's done. She's got, I think her website is called Evidence-Based EFT. So she's done all the brain scans and got all the science behind it that proves that that this works, because it works similar to acupuncture, which is thousands of years old, and of course they knew about all the meridians and all the energy channels in the body, and this works the same way, and you can actually feel it. And it's great for people with ADHD with emotional regulation, because it just like releases those emotions. And that's what's really important, is to let them go, because we've gone through life, so we're taught, especially, and I think it's probably harder for men, because you're told, boys don't cry, this kind of thing. So we end up suppressing them or ignoring them, and then not feeling what we're feeling. And then that can lead to obviously mental health problems, but also physical health problems and things further down the line. And when my ex-husband died in 2014, and the following year I don't think I almost had a breakdown, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the family, because he didn't leave a will, and all the arguments about money and stuff like that, and it just all got too much. And I got this email, and it's just like that little trigger moment, and it's all been building up, and then it was just like the final straw, and it all came out.
Wow.
And I just literally couldn't stop myself from crying. I was just like doing jigsaws, because it helped me calm my mind down, and I was just doing these jigsaws, tears pouring down my face. And I go out, and people say, "Oh, look, you look amazing, Helen." And I think I'm having a shit time at the moment, but I think it was because I was just letting it out. I wasn't suppressing it, or which would just end up making me feel more anxious. It's just like, this has just got to come out. This has just got to heal, and that's So it's just like wherever you're at on your journey, whether you decide to, I'm talking to listeners here, obviously, whether you decide to go for a diagnosis or not, it doesn't really matter what you do. It's like your personal choice. It's your journey, and it's your choice whether you want to go into looking at healing. I mean, because this might be a new concept for some people. The idea, and we know now you can heal pretty much. The body's designed to heal itself as well. And of course, I'm not going to get too political here, but a lot of these diagnoses are designed to sell drugs. And I just think, well, yeah, they can help us to a certain extent, but with the symptoms, but they're not going to help us heal. Eventually, they'll just
suppress.
They can mask and suppress the symptoms, because when I was actually earlier this year, and the doctor prescribed me some antidepressants because I was in a really emotionally dysregulated. I said, this might help you, and I went and got them, picked them up from the pharmacy, and then I don't know whether it was like a psychological thing, because then once I got them, I'm thinking, I don't need these, but maybe it was just because knowing they were there. But also then I was doing a lot of EFT at the time as well, because it was the tapping summit again had come round, and so I hadn't been doing it that much, and it's also that it brought me back to that. And when I was reading about all the trauma as well, I've read lots on the trauma experts like Peter Levine, obviously Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, Janina Fisher, and a lot of them mention EFT as well, and how it can help, because it helps to sort of like rewire the brain and stop those trauma responses, which is where the impulsive behavior comes from, because that's what I couldn't understand about myself. It's like, why, I'm a rational, logical woman. I've been meditating for years. Why do I have these times when I can't seem to stop myself doing things like going on my phone or shopping or spending money on yet another course? And then reading that, oh yeah, this is my brain is like hijacking me almost. And I'm actually at the moment, I'm not there yet. I'm still going through having some hypnotherapy to help deal with that addictive compulsive behavior, because I realized a few months ago, it was just like another little aha moment came from the 12-step program. Isn't it? The first one is like something. I realized I was powerless over alcohol. Only it wasn't alcohol, it was my phone, because I was always reaching out for my phone, because it's just like this agitation, this anxiety, needing to calm myself. And I'm thinking, this is getting out of hand. And then look at the stats on your phone, how much time is spent on it. I'm thinking, no, this is getting out of hand. I need to get some help with this. And then I did. But she's specific. She's actually, her name's Vicky Valence Clark, and actually she's on my podcast this week, an interview I did with her, and how she helps people overcome addictions, which can also be a problem for people who've got ADHD. That's another can be that compulsive behaviour, and recognising that in me, and I think. It was, I think I perhaps hadn't been totally honest with myself before, thinking, oh yeah, I'm fine, because when I go on a retreat, I switch my phone off for the week and I don't even think about it. But then as soon as I'm home, it's like there's this, it's almost like I don't want to switch my phone back on, because I'm worried about getting sucked back in. And also knowing that these things are designed to be addictive as well, like social media, the likes and the comments give us that dopamine hit when somebody comments on one of our posts. So it's kind of like finding other ways. And actually, when I was last on a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and one evening I was having difficulty sleeping, and so I was just lying in bed, just watching my thoughts, and I'm thinking, my mind is much more interesting than anything I ever read on LinkedIn. Why do I spend all this time on my phone? It's like getting to know my mind. It's fascinating how it works and where these thoughts come from, and realizing that you're not your thoughts. The thoughts just arise anyway. They just happen without you needing to do anything.
Agreed. It's funny. Dopamine detox is my latest thing, actually, which is kind of the, satiating and staying away from those things that give you the dopamine highs, like the phone, the social media, because it's a very fast high, isn't it? I mean, and because we ADHD people don't produce a huge amount of dopamine, we get very high from the small amounts that we get anyway, and it's very interesting to hear you talk about the tapping summit and the use of hypnotherapy and so on and so forth. What's next, Helen, for you? You kind of, do you have a thought around, the future and yourself and the world and not just the journey you're on, because you've talked about that, but helping others as well. You talk about your own podcast as well, which is delightful.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm loving listening to that as well.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. And I kind of, the more that I am of the belief that the more you can hear other people's stories, the more it helps your own journey, right? I really believe that. But what's next for you? Do you have any thoughts, plans? Are you kind of going with the flow? What's the thinking process?
Well, as I said before, I've decided, I get lots of ideas, but I just thinking, right, let's make meditation the center of everything that I do. And so I've as I mentioned, I've got a son with drug and alcohol problems, and I've been going to a support group with a local carer support for well, he's just turned 35, so 14 years they've been helping me, so I've been doing some work with them to support unpaid carers, teaching, with group coaching and teaching them some mindfulness techniques as well, all the things that have helped me. So it's what I love doing. It's all these tools. I've got all these tools in my toolbox, and I want, share them with other people. So I have a YouTube channel, which I'm trying to grow. I am growing it, but I'd like it to grow a bit faster so I can start earning some money from
money,
ads.
of course.
Yeah. Well, it's like we have bills to pay, It's like, and I've also on the Insight Time app, which is one that I recommend to people, because again, it gives you stars every 10 days. So when you get a star, that gives you that little dopamine hit. And so there's lots of guided meditation teachers and courses. So my next step in the new year, I'm going to create a course to help people to establish a regular meditation practice. And I did a poll on LinkedIn yesterday to find out what people's main challenges were. And the main one was, I think the highest answer so far was their mind is too busy. I'm thinking, well, that's actually the easiest problem to overcome. You've got a busy mind, that's no problem at all. But it's to address these misconceptions about meditation and the fact that people say, oh, well, I can't meditate. Well, everybody can meditate, So there's that, and because of the benefits that it brings, it's helped me get through all the darkest times in my life, including the problems I've had with my son and all the other things that have happened. So focusing on that, and also doing a lot locally where I live. So I run weekly meditation classes in Bognor Regis, which I'm trying to get more people to come and grow that, because it's difficult, with and I understand it. It's like people will come and then something happens and then they stop coming. I think, well, that's why you need to go, because the thing is, meditation, it doesn't make your problems go away, but it gives you the tools and the resilience to deal with them, with the things that come up. So and I love the quote by Wayne Dyer. He said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think that's so true. A meditation can really help you with that, and with that self-awareness. Because most of the problems in our world, well, all our problems, of course, you look at what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. That's all because people, they're not self-aware, and it's like this because I always think, well, the Dalai Lama is the perfect example, because his country was invaded and yet he didn't go to war and start fighting and things like that. He just sends love and kindness to everybody, even the Chinese who overtook and exiled him from his own country. So it's like the only way we're going to have peace in the world is if we start creating peace within ourselves. And I think so that is kind of like my message, that I want to get everybody in the world meditating. And also I've teamed up with a yoga teacher locally, and we're going to start in the new year running introduction to meditation and yoga workshops for people to come and try it and get the benefits from it, because that's, I do, well, trying to get back into doing my yoga practice regularly as well. So that's another thing, that if you find it hard to sit still, I always find that that doing yoga helps, because that movement, getting into the body, and that's we spend a lot of time in our heads. And also as we touched on, like you said, having that dopamine detox, that digital detox, away from the phone. Stop watching the news as well, is what I say to people, because that's all negative and it doesn't truly reflect what's happening in the world. We live in the most peaceful time in history, even in the last 50 years, 40, 50 years when I was growing up. And I'm sure you know that living in Ireland, we had the IRA bombing everywhere and things like that. And it's like, when you think about it, it's like, it doesn't even seem possible now. We used to have bombs going off in London and things like that. And had a bomb threat in my school, because I grew up in London. But we don't have that now. We live in much more peaceful times in general. And I think, and people are mostly, well, everybody's good, I believe, and helpful generally. It's like when you look at what's going on in even some of the most deprived areas, there's people like helping each other and supporting each other. And I think that's what we need to focus on. So it's because what you focus on expands. So it's like you focus on, and again, going back to what I was saying, go through that difficult time, it's why I chose to focus on gratitude. And then I even keep like I have a spreadsheet for my accounts anyway. One advantage of being a bookkeeper, I can do all my own accounts now. And I also have a page on there when I just keep a track of all the money that comes in, even if I find a penny on the street. Because I think if I focus on this, on the money that I haven't got, or that I spent on courses all those years ago that I never did, well, that's in the past now. I can't change that now. So let's focus on what I've got now. And then suddenly, and having that faith that everything's worked out up until now. So why wouldn't it work out in the future as well?
Absolutely.
So it's focusing on the good things and having that gratitude practice. And going back, and I've just been reading Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is. And she says that it's like all the problems are caused by our thinking and the way we think about things. So, and like you said, you asked me before about that sense of empathy and picking up on people and what they need. I see that. I pick up on the energy behind people's social media posts as well. And you can see there's a lot of them are just so angry, and it's like, woo. And especially if somebody comments on your post, it's almost like I feel it in my solar plexus, especially if it's an angry response. Oh, because I said this. And I posted something a few months ago about saying when I was reading about trauma and realizing actually I can sort these ADHD symptoms out. A lot of people thought it was great, but then also some people, like, because they built a whole identity around this. And I think that's the thing. You have to be prepared to let go of that, of who you think you are and this identity. And I see that very much in the neurodivergent community, that it becomes almost like this dualistic thing. There's them and us. There's the neurodivergent people and there's the neurotypical people. Well, there's no such thing. It's a spectrum. You know, there's no dividing line. We've all got,
there isn't.
you know, so you start looking at people around you, it's like you're thinking, well, everybody's neurodivergent, really, if we're talking about
They are.
everybody's got their quirks and their anomalies that are based on how on their conditions and what shaped them. So so that's, you know, it's like understanding that. Well, how did I become to be this person and all these? I mean, and it's like when my ex-husband died, and of course I realised that when I'd left the marriage, I hadn't dealt with it, and that's why all this stuff came up, because I was just so relieved to be out of it. And then it was like, okay, well, I need to heal from that. And then it was like, well, it's not just about, okay, yes, I was in an abusive marriage, but it's like we've got to go back further than that and see, well, what was it that led me to be in that marriage in the first place? You know, I can't put all the blame on him. Something had, you know, there was a set of conditions that created that situation, and what were they? So, because if I'm not aware of that, I'll just end up going and creating the same scenarios over and over again.
That's interesting. Helen, tell me, you know, you've referenced quite a lot of books, actually, and it's lovely to listen to somebody who's such a reader, like myself, actually. And if you were to recommend one book, and again, not favoritism, please, that's not the intention of this, but again, for those out there who are kind of either pre-diagnosis or kind of considering, do I have ADHD? Is there one book that springs to mind, you know, from your own reading that you would recommend people read, either to give a good overview or a sense of direction or something? Is there one that springs to mind at all, or perhaps a website equally?
Yeah, well, my favourite, well, not my favourite, it's not my favourite book, but I think one that I can see that really helped me is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey.
Oh,
because I love his
yes.
little habits grid, and that can really help with sort of organisation. You know, it's like, well, when it's like I've got all these things I need to do, and then I do that. I tend to categorise them now: important, not urgent, important, or whatever they are, because the ones that he said that you should prioritise, the ones that are important but not urgent, are the ones that tend to get left. So, and I found that really helpful. And again, there's a lovely story in there about how he has an experience which changes his view on a situation. He thinks it's one way, then something happens. I won't spoil it, but then he calls it a paradigm shift. And so, and I think, you know, that can help the way that you view certain situations, and it, you know, and helped him to become more compassionate because of the way people are acting. Because I see that, you know, that there's a lot of, you know, and I include myself in that. I know I can be very judgmental at times, and I try and catch myself doing that. And there's a lot of that going on. Oh, because people shouldn't be acting like that or that. But it's like, well, you don't know what's going on behind the way they're acting. So it's just like bringing compassion to that and just saying, well, that they're doing their best. They think that what they're doing is right. You think what you're doing is right. But that to them they might think that what you're doing is wrong. So it's like coming back to that, really. And I think, yeah, but the book that I actually read that actually changed my life and set me on this trajectory was, I actually got it free with a magazine, and it was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's another good book as well, because it's really good about, you know, helping you step outside your comfort zone and just expanding that sort of and to help you grow. And it's like, oh, this might do things that scare you.
My favorite phrase actually ever is, the magic you are looking for is in the thing you are avoiding. I live by that phrase. I live by it. And it kind of just walk towards stuff that I'm fearful of all the time. and you know, staying out of the comfort zone, just keep walking to, and it's magic. It is really magic. You know, there's a book, a very old book, and I'm not even sure it's in print anymore. And it's called, it's by Richard Bandler. There's 2 volumes of it. And it's, oh my God, the name's gone out of my mind now. The Structure of Magic. Now, as a maths teacher, you will love this. Structure of Magic Volume 1, Structure of Magic Volume 2, and it's an incredible couple of books if you've never heard of it before. If you can find it.
No, I haven't,
like I said,
actually.
I'm not even certain it's in print anymore, to be fair. Helen, I'm going to ask you one last question, if you don't mind. And I'm so grateful for your stories today. Thank you so much. It's a very simple question, but I do ask everybody. If I could click my fingers and take away your ADHD today, would you choose to do that?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that, because I'm not sure what it is anyway. I wouldn't want to change if that's, you know. So I suppose the answer is no, because it's like, it you know, sometimes I think, oh, you know, when I look back over my life, oh, well, I wish I'd known, and that kind of thing. But then all those experiences have shaped me into who I am today. So it's like, again, there's no point in worrying about what's happened, although it doesn't stop you at times. You can't change it. And I think so it's about just coming to that point of acceptance and changing the things that you can, that are within your power to control and change, and letting go of anything that you can't. Like, the biggest one for me is what other people do, what they think and what they say. It's like, it's none of my business.
No, it really isn't, right? It really isn't.
Yeah.
So, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's been a delightful chat. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
I
really enjoyed it, George. Yeah, thank you.
Let me just press stop for a second. And 1, 2, 3, stop.